The table was already tipping when Bumpy Johnson's hand went inside his coat. Glasses sliding across polished wood, ashtray spinning airborne with ash trailing behind it like smoke from a falling star. And the man in the gray suit across from him, reaching for the same deadly answer at the exact same second. Both men locked in a moment where time compressed, and every choice narrowed to one. Wait. Because what happens in the next 3 seconds will decide whether this Harlem back room fills with gunfire and sirens, or if someone blinks first and walks away breathing. And everything that happens after tonight in this neighborhood depends on who makes which choice right now. The table hit the floor with a crack that echoed off the walls like a gunshot warning. Bourbon splashed across the wood in dark amber waves. Ice cubes scattered like dice thrown by fate. And the white tablecloth crumpled between Bumpy Johnson and Vincent Caruso, like a flag of surrender that neither man was willing to raise. They stood 5 feet apart now, hands inside their coats, eyes locked in a calculation that had no room for mistakes, no second chances, no walking back from whatever happened next. Vincent didn't belong north of 96th Street. Everyone in this room knew it, could smell it on him like expensive cologne that didn't match Harlem's rhythm. But here he was, in Miss Della's back room on a Tuesday night, and the conversation they'd been having 30 seconds ago was over, dead as the cigarette that had been burning in the ashtray before it went flying. Now it was just physics and will, who draws faster, who blinks first, who decides that dying in Harlem tonight isn't worth whatever brought them to this table. Write in the comments, where are you listening to this story from? And what time is it right now? Nobody moved. Not Bumpy, not Vincent, not the bartender frozen at the edge of the room with a bottle of rye whiskey in his hand, label facing out like he'd been in the middle of pouring when the world stopped. Not the 3 men who'd come in with Vincent, now pressed against the exposed brick wall, with their hands visible and empty, and held slightly away from their bodies, because they knew better than to reach for anything, when Bumpy Johnson was already reaching. The jazz piano had stopped mid-phrase, the notes hanging in the air unfinished, like a question nobody wanted to answer. The singer's voice cut off mid-note, her mouth still open in the shape of a word she'd never get to finish. The whole room held its breath, cigarette smoke drifting lazy through the air, like it had all the time in the world, waiting to see if the next sound would be words or bullets, or the kind of silence that comes after something ends forever. Bumpy's hand was still inside his coat, fingers wrapped around cold steel. So was Vincent's, the weight of the gun pressed against Bumpy's ribs, cold and heavy and patient, steel waiting for a decision that would change everything or change nothing, depending on how the next second played out. He could feel his heartbeat, slow and steady like a drumbeat, counting down. The way it always was when the world narrowed down to one choice and everything else fell away into silence. Draw or talk, shoot or step back, live or die. Simple math with permanent answers. Look at how this moment happened, because 5 minutes ago, these 2 men were sitting across from each other, like businessmen, and the table between them was still upright, and Vincent was smiling that smile he probably practiced in the mirror, wide and friendly and completely fake. 5 minutes ago, Vincent slid an envelope across that table and told Bumpy it contained an opportunity, $5,000 now, another 5 when the shipment cleared, easy money for looking the other way while Vincent's people moved cargo through Harlem at midnight. 5 minutes ago. Bumpy listened without interrupting. He looked at the envelope, white, unmarked, thick with cash. He looked at Vincent, and then he said 4 words that made Vincent's smile disappear. Harlem's not for rent. That's when Vincent's hand moved toward his coat. That's when Bumpy's chair scraped backward. That's when the table stopped being furniture and became a barrier. And then Bumpy's knee hit it, hard, and the whole thing tipped forward. And now here they were, standing, reaching, calculating whether the next second would be the last one. Vincent blinked first. Not a big blink, not a surrender, just a flicker of the eyes. A half-second break in the stare. And Bumpy saw it. saw the calculation change, saw Vincent realize that pulling a gun in Miss Della's back room meant dying in Miss Della's back room, because Bumpy Johnson didn't miss, and Vincent's 3 boys against the wall weren't fast enough to matter. Vincent's hand came out of his coat, empty, palm up, slow. Easy, Bumpy, easy. We're just talking. Bumpy's hand stayed where it was. We're done talking. You bring an envelope full of money and a gun for insurance, then act surprised when I flip the table. You don't know Harlem. You don't know me. Vincent took a breath. His hand was still up, still empty, but his voice had an edge now. The truck rolls at midnight, whether you're on board or not. I was trying to do this clean. You're making it messy. You made it messy when you walked in here thinking you could buy a road through my city, Bumpy said. His voice was quiet, calm. The kind of calm that makes smart men nervous. Now get out. Take your boys. Take your envelope. And tell whoever sent you that the next time they want to move something through Harlem, they ask first, not with cash, with respect. Vincent's jaw tightened. For a second, Bumpy thought he might reach again, might test the math one more time. But Vincent was smarter than that, or at least smart enough to know when he'd lost. He nodded once, short and tight, and stepped back. His boys peeled off the wall, moving careful, hands still visible. Vincent bent down, picked up the envelope from the wet floor, where bourbon was soaking into the corners, and walked toward the door without looking back. The door closed behind them. The room stayed quiet for another 5 seconds, and then somebody coughed, and the piano player hit a key, and the whole club exhaled and went back to pretending nothing had happened. Bumpy stood in the middle of the back room, looking at the overturned table, the spilled bourbon soaking into the floor, the scattered ice melting into nothing. Miss Della walked over with a towel in her hand. "You good?" she asked. "Yeah," Bumpy said. He straightened his coat. "What time is it?" She checked the clock behind the bar. "Midnight." Vincent said the truck rolled at midnight. That gave Bumpy 3 hours and 11 minutes to decide what happened when that truck tried to move through Harlem without permission. He could let it roll. He could stop it. He could make Vincent's threat come true and let the mess spill into the streets. Or he could send a message so loud every crew from here to the Bronx would hear it by sunrise. Notice the weight of that clock. Because this isn't just about one truck or one night. This is about whether Bumpy Johnson controls Harlem, or whether Harlem becomes a highway for anyone with cash and a gun. Bumpy walked out of Miss Della's and into the October cold. His driver Marcus was leaning against the black Chrysler, smoking a cigarette, reading the street like a book. He dropped the cigarette when Bumpy came out. "Trouble?" Marcus asked. "Not yet," Bumpy said. He got in the car. "Drive." Marcus didn't ask where. He just drove, through Harlem, past the diners and corner stores, past the pool hall where Tommy was running tables, past the church where Deacon Wallace was probably locking up after choir practice. Bumpy watched it all slide past the window, his city, his streets, his people, and he thought about Vincent's smile and the weight of the gun that was still under his coat. But most of all, he was thinking about his brother, Junior, Bumpy's younger brother by 3 years, a man who loved Harlem and hated the idea of outsiders moving through it like they owned the place. Junior ran a garage off Lenox Avenue, kept his head down and his hands clean, and Bumpy had promised him, years ago, that Harlem would stay clean too. No wars, no blood on the sidewalks, no trucks rolling through in the middle of the night with cargo that could turn the neighborhood into a target. And now Vincent Caruso had offered Bumpy $5,000 to break that promise. The Chrysler turned onto a quieter residential street, lined with brown stones. Marcus pulled over in front of a 3-story building with green shutters and a light on in the second-floor window. Bumpy's building, his home. A place he'd bought 5 years ago with money earned from numbers, protection, and the kind of quiet deals that kept Harlem running without too many police questions. "You want me to wait?" Marcus asked, the engine idling low. Bumpy shook his head. "Go home. I'll call if I need you." Marcus nodded and pulled away as soon as Bumpy closed the door. The street went quiet again. Bumpy stood on the sidewalk, looking up at the light in his window, and for a second he thought about walking in, pouring a drink, and letting the clock run out, letting Vincent's truck roll through Harlem without an answer, letting the chips fall where they fell, and dealing with the mess in the morning. But that wasn't how Bumpy Johnson worked. He didn't let chips fall. He stacked them. And he never walked away from a choice without knowing every angle, every cost, every consequence. He turned and started walking, not toward his building, toward the church. Deacon Wallace was still there, just like Bumpy knew he would be. The basement door was unlocked, and the lights were still on. And when Bumpy walked down the narrow staircase into the rec room, where the choir practiced, he found the deacon sitting at an old upright piano, playing something slow and hymnal, his fingers moving over the keys like he was talking to someone who wasn't there. Wallace looked up when Bumpy walked in. He didn't stop playing. He just nodded once and kept going, and Bumpy pulled out a folding chair and sat down and waited. The hymn ended. Wallace's hands lifted off the keys, and the silence that followed felt heavier than the music. "You look like a man with a problem," Wallace said. "I always got problems," Bumpy said. "Tonight I got one that's got a clock on it." Wallace turned on the piano bench to face him. He was 60-something, gray at the temples, with hands that had built half the furniture in this church, and a voice that could fill the sanctuary on a Sunday morning. He'd known Bumpy since Bumpy was a kid running errands for men who didn't live long enough to collect their debts, and he'd never once told Bumpy how to live his life. He just listened, and sometimes, when Bumpy needed it, he asked the questions Bumpy didn't want to ask himself. "What kind of problem?" Wallace asked. Bumpy told him. Not everything. Not the names, not the details, not the exact amount in the envelope, but he told him enough. A man from outside Harlem wanted to move cargo through Bumpy's streets. Easy money, no risk. Just look the other way and cash the check. And if Bumpy said no, the man would move it anyway, and Harlem would pay the price for the mess. Wallace listened without interrupting. When Bumpy finished, the deacon leaned back, elbows on the piano, and looked at the ceiling like he was reading something written in the cracks. "You already know what you're gonna do," Wallace said. "Maybe," Bumpy said. "But I don't know if it's the right thing." "Right for who?" Wallace asked. "For you? For your brother? For Harlem?" He looked at Bumpy, and his eyes were tired but steady. "You can't protect everybody, Bumpy. Sooner or later, you gotta choose who you're willing to lose." Wait, because that line is gonna stick with Bumpy all the way to midnight. You can't protect everybody. Sooner or later, you gotta choose who you're willing to lose. Wallace didn't say it to hurt him. He said it because it was true, and the truth was the only thing Bumpy respected more than power. Bumpy stood up. He didn't thank Wallace. He just nodded, the way men nod when words aren't enough, and walked back up the stairs into the October night. The clock on the church tower said 9:43. He had 2 hours and 17 minutes. He walked, not home, not to Marcus, not to the club. He walked through Harlem, like a man checking the locks on every door in his house, past the corner stores and the diners and the brownstones where families were getting ready for bed. He walked past the garage where Junior worked, and the lights were off, and Bumpy could see his brother's truck parked in the lot, covered in dust from a long day's work. He walked past the pool hall where Tommy was still running a table, and he could hear the crack of balls and the low hum of men betting money they didn't have on shots they couldn't make. And he walked past the docks. The docks were quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that meant something was about to happen. Bumpy stood in the shadows across the street, hands in his pockets, and watched the trucks lined up near the water. One of them had to be Vincent's. One of them had 12 crates, and a driver who was waiting for the word to roll. Bumpy checked his watch. 10:19. He had 1 hour and 41 minutes. He turned and walked back into Harlem, moving with purpose now. No more hesitation. He stopped at a payphone on the corner of Lenox and 128th, dropped a nickel, dialed. Tommy answered on the second ring. "Yeah? It's me," Bumpy said. "You still at the pool hall?" "Yeah, boss. What do you need?" "Get 3 of our best boys. Meet me at Lenox and 132nd at midnight. Bring a truck." There was a pause. Then Tommy's voice came back. Steady. "We stopping something?" "Yeah," Bumpy said. "We're stopping something. And Tommy, make sure they know this isn't about muscle. It's about sending a message." "Understood," Tommy said. Bumpy hung up. He stood there for a moment, hand still on the receiver, watching the street. A cab rolled past. A couple walked by on the other side, arm in arm, laughing about something. Normal Tuesday night in Harlem. But in less than 2 hours, that normalcy depended on what Bumpy Johnson decided to do when Vincent's truck tried to roll through without permission. Remember this moment, because right now, Bumpy just made the choice that'll echo through Harlem for weeks. He's not taking Vincent's money. He's not looking the other way. He's meeting that truck at the intersection where it tries to cross into his territory. And he's taking the cargo, not to keep it, not to sell it, but to prove a point that every crew in New York needs to understand. You don't move through Harlem without asking Bumpy Johnson first. He walked 4 more blocks to a diner that stayed open all night, slid into a booth by the window, ordered coffee black and sat there watching the clock on the wall tick forward. The waitress refilled his cup twice without being asked. She knew who he was, knew better than to make small talk. At 11:28, Bumpy dropped $3 on the table and walked out. Marcus was waiting at the curb in the Chrysler. Bumpy hadn't called him, but he was there anyway, because that's how Marcus worked. 7 years as Bumpy's driver, and he'd learned to read the rhythm of Harlem's nights better than most men read newspapers. "Lenox and 132nd, Bumpy said, getting in. Marcus pulled into traffic. They drove in silence, the city sliding past the windows, neon signs, streetlights, the glow of apartment windows, where people were settling in for the night, unaware that the rules of their neighborhood were about to be rewritten on a street corner 6 blocks away. They arrived at 11:51. Tommy was already there with 3 men. Bumpy recognized Carlo, a thick-shouldered enforcer who'd been with Bumpy since the beginning. Big Mike, who earned his name honestly and could lift a truck axle with one hand, and a younger kid everybody called Smooth because he could talk his way out of situations that would have gotten most men killed. They had a delivery truck parked across the northbound lane. Looked legitimate, like they were unloading supplies for the bodega on the corner. But the truck was empty, and the 4 men standing around it weren't delivery men. Bumpy got out of the Chrysler. Tommy walked over. "Boys are ready," Tommy said. "What's the play?" "Truck's coming through in about 8 minutes, Bumpy said. "Let it get to the middle of the intersection, then block it front and back. Driver's gonna argue. Let him. When he's done talking, tell him he's got 2 choices. Unload the cargo and walk away, or we unload it for him, and he doesn't walk anywhere." Tommy nodded. "And if he reaches for something, then we handle it," Bumpy said. "But I don't think he will." Vincent sent a driver, not a soldier. This was supposed to be easy money, remember? The driver's just trying to do a job. We're teaching Vincent a lesson, not the driver. "Got it," Tommy said. "Listen to the way Bumpy sets this up. He's not starting a war. He's drawing a line. There's a difference. A war means everybody bleeds. A line means you make one example, loud and clear, and then everybody knows where they stand." At 11:57, headlights appeared at the south end of Lenox. A medium-sized truck, unmarked, moving at normal speed, not rushing. Not creeping, just a truck making a delivery, trying to blend into the Tuesday night traffic that didn't exist anymore because it was almost midnight and this part of Harlem was asleep. The truck rolled closer. Bumpy could see the driver now. Young guy, maybe 25, white, definitely not from around here, looking nervous even from a distance. The truck slowed as it approached the intersection. Tommy gave a signal. Carlo pulled the delivery truck forward, blocking the north exit. Smooth jogged across the street and positioned himself behind the incoming truck. Big Mike stood in the middle of the intersection, hand raised like a traffic cop. The truck stopped. The driver's window rolled down. "Hey, what's going on? I got a delivery." Bumpy walked up to the driver's side. Slow, hands visible, not threatening, just present. "Where you delivering to?" The driver hesitated. "Up north. Got a manifest and everything." "Let me see it," Bumpy said. The driver fumbled with a clipboard, handed it over. Bumpy glanced at it, saw Vincent's organization's name hidden under 3 layers of shell companies, saw the destination, a warehouse in the Bronx, that Bumpy knew was controlled by a crew that had been trying to move into Harlem for months. "Here's the thing," Bumpy said, handing the clipboard back. "This route, it goes through my streets. And nobody told me about it. Nobody asked. Nobody showed respect. So now you got a choice." The driver swallowed hard. "Look, man, I'm just doing my job. I don't want trouble." "Then you won't get trouble," Bumpy said. "Unload the cargo. Leave it here. Go back and tell Vincent that the next time he wants to move product through Harlem, he sends someone who knows how to ask permission. You do that. You drive away clean. You try to argue. You try to run. You try to reach for anything under that seat. And this gets complicated for both of us." The driver looked at Bumpy, looked at Tommy, and the other 3 men surrounding the truck, looked at the empty street where no help was coming. "Okay," the driver said. "Okay, I'll unload it." Notice what just happened. No shots fired. No blood spilled. Just the driver making the smart choice, and Bumpy proving that control in Harlem doesn't require violence when the message is clear enough. The driver got out, opened the back of the truck. 12 wooden crates, exactly like Vincent said. Tommy and the boys helped unload them, stacking them on the corner. The whole thing took 4 minutes. When the last crate was down, Bumpy stepped back. "Drive safe," he said. The driver got back in his truck, hands shaking a little, and pulled away. Didn't speed, didn't look back, just drove south, back the way he came. And Bumpy knew that by 1 in the morning, Vincent would know what happened. By 2, every crew from the Bronx to Brooklyn would know. By sunrise, the story would be legend. Tommy looked at the crates. "What do we do with them?" "Burn them," Bumpy said. "Don't open them. Don't touch what's inside. Just burn them in the alley behind the church. Make sure Wallace knows it's happening. Make sure the whole block sees the smoke. I want people to wake up tomorrow and ask what burned last night, and I want the answer to be Vincent Caruso's mistake." Tommy grinned. "Yes, sir." Bumpy got back in the Chrysler. Marcus pulled away from the curb, and they drove through the quiet Harlem night, leaving Tommy and the boys to finish the job. They drove past Miss Della's club. The lights were still on. The music was still playing. People inside had no idea that the deal Vincent tried to make died on a street corner 6 blocks away. They drove past the church. Wallace's light was on in the basement, probably still at the piano. Bumpy made a mental note to stop by Sunday and thank him properly for the advice he'd given without giving it. They drove past Junior's garage. Dark, quiet, safe. And they drove home. Bumpy got out of the Chrysler at 12:26, walked up to his apartment, poured himself a bourbon, neat, and sat by the window looking out at Harlem. The streets were almost empty now. Just a few late-night stragglers, a cab or two, the glow of corner store signs that never turned off. The phone rang at 12:41. Bumpy didn't answer. He just sat there, drink in hand, listening to it ring 8 times, 9, 10, then silence. He knew it was Vincent, knew what Vincent wanted to say, but there was nothing to talk about. The truck was stopped. The cargo was ash by now, and Harlem had just taught Vincent Caruso a lesson about respect that no amount of money could buy. Before we close this night, you need to understand something about the choice Bumpy made. He didn't stop Vincent's truck because he was greedy or territorial. He stopped it because the moment he let that truck roll through without permission, Harlem stopped being a neighborhood and became a marketplace. And in a marketplace, everything's for sale, including the people who live there. That's the line Bumpy held. That's why, the next morning, when the word spread through Harlem like smoke, a truck got stopped, cargo got burned, Bumpy Johnson sent a message. People didn't whisper about it in fear. They talked about it with a kind of quiet pride, because somebody was still protecting this place. Somebody still believed Harlem belonged to the people who lived here, not the people who wanted to use it. Vincent never came back to Miss Della's. The envelope he'd left behind, Miss Della found it on the floor near the overturned table, still damp with bourbon. She held onto it for 3 days, then burned it in the same fire that burned Vincent's cargo, because dirty money and dirty deals deserved the same ending. Junior found out about the truck a week later. He didn't ask Bumpy for details. He just walked into Bumpy's apartment one afternoon, shook his brother's hand, and said, "Thanks for keeping it clean." Bumpy nodded, because that's all that needed to be said. Deacon Wallace never mentioned their conversation in the church basement, but the next Sunday, when Bumpy walked into the sanctuary and sat in the back row, Wallace was at the piano for the opening hymn, and when he turned around to face the congregation, his eyes found Bumpy's for just a second, and he nodded. Just once, but it was enough. And Tommy, the kid from the pool hall who'd stood at that intersection at midnight and helped Bumpy draw the line? He got promoted into Bumpy's inner circle, not because he was the toughest or the smartest, but because when the moment came, he followed orders without hesitation. And in Bumpy's world, loyalty like that was worth more than all the cargo Vincent Caruso could have moved through Harlem in a lifetime. If you want to hear about the night 3 years later, when a different crew tried to test Bumpy's control over the waterfront and learned the hard way that some lessons only get taught once, drop a comment and let me know, because Harlem's got more stories than streetlights, and every one of them starts with someone thinking they can take what doesn't belong to them, and ends with Bumpy Johnson reminding them why that never works.